Hare Krishna, welcome dear devotees. Thank you so much for joining us today for yet another beautiful episode of the Bond of Love series. It is my great honor to be in conversation with Jagattarini Devi. Jagattarini Devi, thank you so much, Jagattarini Prabhu, for joining us. Such an honor to have you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It is such an honor to have you.
Thank you.
So, Jagattarini Prabhu, she met the devotees in 1970 in Sydney and 1969 in Sydney. And as soon as she met the devotees, her heart was already drawn towards the beautiful chanting, and she decided to dedicate her life. After 6 decades of dedicated service, where she, along with her husband, Bhurijana Prabhu, started the first ISKCON temple in Hong Kong. She served in Hong Kong. She moved to Melbourne, served the devotees there. She stayed in Gita Nagari and extremely contributed with puppet shows, children's programs in Gita Nagari. Moved to Vrindavan
In
for
Darwin.
11 years and then moved back to Sydney. She traveled to preach the message of Krishna and Srila Prabhupada. And since 2001, she has been assisting and co-leading the Govardhan retreats at the Govardhan Retreat Center in Vrindavan. It's such an honor to be in conversation with you, Jagattarini Prabhu. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Please tell us a little bit about what was in your mind when you first met the devotees and what really inspired you. Just a little bit about your journey.
Well, I first met devotees in Sydney, in Australia, and I didn't take them very seriously, but they were nice people. And I was trying to become a vegetarian, and so I found they were vegetarian, and that was practical. And I went to the temple, and I still remember how I went into an empty room because there were only 2 young men there in that temple at that time. This is 1970. And I saw there was one wardrobe and a sleeping bag kind of pushed into the wardrobe, and there was no furniture. And I still remember distinctly thinking, I will never join these people. They didn't have any luxury. They didn't have any normalcy about their way of life. Then soon after that, I was traveling on to America and then to England, and I was passing through Los Angeles. And before I left, one of those devotees, Upendra, told me that Prabhupada, who now he had introduced me to him, was staying in Los Angeles, and if I was to go to the Los Angeles temple, I could hear him and meet him. And so I went. I wasn't anticipating ever joining these people, but
you wanted
somehow
to
or
see,
another.
but you wanted
Yes.
to see Prabhupada.
Yes, I thought I would like to see somebody who's a genuinely spiritual person of some sort. Yes, I felt like I was on some kind of a spiritual journey.
So, what is your favorite memory? Was it your first meeting with Srila Prabhupada? Was that your favorite memory? Or what was your favorite memory of being in the association of Srila Prabhupada?
Well, I was asked to think about this. What was my favorite memory? And it was difficult for me to decide which was actually favorite, because our relationship involved a few steps or stages and different intense moments. But I think that I concluded that my favorite memory was when I was leaving Vrindavan in 1974, because he had requested my husband and I to come to the first Mayapur festival, which was held in 1974. And I was leaving Vrindavan. And as soon as I came to Vrindavan, I brightened up. It was a difficult part of my Krishna conscious journey at that time. But as soon as I came into Vrindavan, my eyes kind of like glistened, and I was like, yeah, this is a place for me. And when I was leaving, my husband said, let's go and see Srila Prabhupada. And he was sitting behind his room because the temple wasn't complete at that time. And he was taking a massage. And my husband, the devotee who was his secretary, said, you can't see him now. Women can't see him when he's taking a massage. And my husband said to me, come on. So we were at the back and we went under the bench that was there, and we came and paid obeisances to him. And he was happy to see us. He wanted us to go back to Hong Kong. And he said, immediately looked at me and he said, so how do you like Vrindavan? And it was an incredible moment, because I just said to Prabhupada, oh, it's wonderful, Prabhupada. And he said, shot back with a big smile, he shot back. He said, then you should come and live here. And I shot back with a big smile. I said, you just sent us back to Hong Kong. And he looked very pleased with himself, and he said, then you should come here for some months every year. And I think that could be summed up as my most special moment with him.
Isn't that amazing how practical Srila Prabhupada was? You know, he allowed
Yes.
you to get that retreat of recharge in Vrindavan and then go back and get back to work.
Yes.
It's just amazing.
Well, the interesting thing was that he was amazing, definitely, but we were very young. And so we couldn't actually translate his instructions carefully. To me, it seemed like it was a sweet exchange. He was making like a joke. You know, you sent me here and you're saying I can come here, but obviously I can't. So I couldn't imagine that I could go to Vrindavan every year. It was very hard in Hong Kong, and we had no backup support. And so I didn't take that. Of course, it was up to my husband, but I didn't take that very seriously. And as a result of not taking that seriously, we went back to Hong Kong and very soon became exhausted there and very unhappy there, and decided to move on from Hong Kong without informing Srila Prabhupada. Oh, we did inform him, but we didn't ask. We moved on. That's how we got to Melbourne.
Hmm.
The next time he saw us, he expressed his concern.
It's just amazing that you're able to share that with that perspective, that sometimes we make decisions in our life, and then when we think back, and we do realize that at that moment we lacked maturity, and we
Yes.
lacked, I mean, that's a beautiful way of how Srila Prabhupada engaged you. But was this your primary service? Was that how he meant to engage you? By traveling with your husband and preaching, or traveling by yourself and preaching and
No,
spreading Krishna consciousness?
he wanted us to run a center in Hong Kong. Well, here's what happened. In those days, 1970, when I moved into the LA temple, the movement was so immature, so much in its infancy, that there was a naivete about what it meant to be married, and it was linked with service. It wasn't linked with compatibility or having children or educating children. That wasn't there. And so each of the devotees, I only was there with a 6-month visa because I was just passing through America, and somehow I moved in. And so it was so random. I would say, in a sense, that one day they told all the girls who were staying in the ashram that for a Sunday feast program, they wanted to get them all married.
Huh. Oh, really?
But they didn't include me. I guess because I wasn't a resident there. And also more mysterious than that, as I was saying, there are different times with Srila Prabhupada that were pertinent, was that when I first moved into the temple, Upendra in Australia had sent Srila Prabhupada a message saying that I was a movie star, which I wasn't. I was aspiring to be, but I hadn't gone very far into that career path. And so Srila Prabhupada was asking, there's this actress has come. He wanted to see her. And simultaneously, the way Upendra arranged for me to go to the temple was somebody gave me a gift before I left Sydney. They gave me a gift and asked me to give that gift to Prabhupada on their behalf. And I was just like, okay, I'll just carry it and bring it. So I brought it. It was a pen wrapped up in a little piece of blue cloth. It was very homely. And so I brought it. And when I moved into the temple, I thought, oh, I'm supposed to give everything here. So I gave them my ticket. I gave them all my money. I abandoned all my new clothes and fashion and everything. And also I gave them this pen. And I gave it to the temple president. And I said, this is supposed to be for Prabhupada. But then after about 2 weeks, I happened to be in his office and I saw that the pen was still sitting on his desk. And so I thought in a clever way, and I said, did you give that pen to Srila Prabhupada? It's right there. And he said, no. And he said, so if you want, you can give it to him yourself. And so I had the opportunity to go up to Srila Prabhupada's rooms in the LA temple with the pen to give to him. And he was expecting somebody who was much more, what would I say, more important, more professional than myself. So he treated me like that, although I was a little nervous because I was just starting out. And he said to me when I came in and sat down, he said to me, so first he said to me, are you English? And I said, no, I'm Australian. And then again, he said, you're English? I said, no, I'm Australian, but I was an actress and, I had a neutral accent. So then he said, oh, he said, then you should put on plays. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. He said, you should put on plays. He said, that will attract a higher class of people. He said, currently we are attracting mostly hippies. But if we present the culture of Krishna consciousness, then we will attract a higher class of people. And then he asked about a play that had been written. He asked his servant if the play was available, and they didn't find it. And so then he started to tell me different Leela incidences in the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, about the mango tree, about something about a boat. He told me 3 or 4 different stories. And then he said Vishnujan, who was very prominent in the temple at that time, he should write this play and you should perform the role of Sachi Devi. I didn't know any of these things. I didn't know who they were, what they were, anything. And so then I said to him,
how long were you connected with the devotees? Just a few months or something?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks. And they were considering getting all the girls married. So needless to say, a lot of those marriages were not successful because there wasn't much forethought available. The devotees themselves didn't know how to actually do anything. So Prabhupada, then he just told me, you should put on plays and Vishnujan will help. And I'm sitting there not sure about any of this. And then he looked at me and he said, you're here in this country with your parents? And I said, no. And then he looked at me and said, you're married? And I said, no. And I was quite proud of myself. I'm doing everything by myself. And then he looked at me and with his eyes became really soft, like really concerned. And he said to me, you're alone. And I said, yes. I thought it was great. And then he reached forward a little bit and he looked to me a little bit like confidentially. And he said to me, I will find you a nice husband. I was absolutely horrified, to be honest. I mean, honored that he would say that, but I was so new as a devotee and that he's telling me he's going to find me a husband. I didn't know how to respond. I felt honored, as I said, and I was like, well, thank you. But when I got out of the room, I thought, I'm not going to tell anyone that, because it was such an unusual thing to say. But
in your first meeting and 2 weeks into the movement.
Yeah. And so then I went on, they married all the other girls, and I started thinking, oh, maybe I do want a husband after all. I didn't know what it meant or the responsibilities. I was too young. But then they found that there was a boy, the temple president said, there's a boy who stopped through here on his way to Japan. He wanted to get married, and he would make a really nice husband because he knows how to play the mridanga. I was like, wow, he knows how to play the mridanga. Yes, he knows how to play the mridanga. You can do Harinam, you can do so many things together, because the concept was you marry to open a temple. That was as far as we understood. And so this was a privilege. Wow. So then he said, he's in Tokyo. You'd have to go to Tokyo and marry him there. And I was like, well, that sounds amazing. And I didn't have a visa to stay in America, and I was so young. So I said, okay, that sounds really good. And they got in touch with him. And then during that time, he was encouraged by the GBC for all of Asia to go to Hong Kong and start a temple there. And so that devotee, Bali Madan, he came to LA, and I said, what's this person like? And he said, oh, he's okay, it'll work. And then I was ready to leave. My visa expired and I left that same day. And it was really interesting because my mother was in Australia. She was in Melbourne, and she was having, I don't know what she was going through. She was so worried about her daughter who'd given away all her money, given away her ticket, given away everything, living in a temple. She was beside herself.
Of course,
but she couldn't do anything. Yeah, and now she said, Mum, I'm getting married. Interestingly, my mother saved all the letters I ever sent her when I was in America. And so I had the embarrassing privilege years later, 30, 40 years later, to read what I wrote her at that time without any understanding of what it was like to be a mother or what it was like to have your daughter sort of change her life radically. And so because I had a little bit of...
How long were you in LA when you met Srila Prabhupada?
3 weeks. I was there for 1 week before I went to the temple, and then 2 weeks in the temple itself. And then I met Srila Prabhupada. So let me just finish that. So there was a reporter came from the TV magazine in Melbourne to do an article on this movie star, became a devotee, so on. And he was a nice gentleman. And I said to him, because I knew how that industry works, I said to him, please don't sensationalize this. You know, I'll talk to you and tell you what I know. I was brand new, but I don't want you to sensationalize it. And he assured me he wouldn't, but he couldn't help it because it was a TV magazine. So my mother in Australia is walking down the street one day and she sees the headlines outside on the billboard, and it says, "Weird sect forces famous movie actress to marry Japanese monk." And my mother went in, because she bought that newspaper every time, and opened it up and saw it was me. It was beside herself. I said, he's not Japanese, and it's not a weird sect, and I was not a famous movie actress. Please don't worry, everything is all right. And somehow she survived. And then my 6 months were up. A ticket came to go to Hong Kong. I got on a plane. It was a Sunday, and I was outside doing some service. And I said to Nandarani, who was in charge of the ladies, I said, Nandarani, I have to go to the airport now. And she said, okay. And I got in the car, and I had with me, when I arrived, I had 3 big suitcases full of clothes and makeup and wigs and photos and so many things. And when I left, I had a little tiny suitcase. The zip didn't work, and I tied it up with some string. And I'm wearing a sari. And I get in the car, we're driving, I say, Nandarani, I don't have any money. Do you have any money? And she said, look in the glove box. So I look in the glove box. I said, there's no money. She said, that's not a problem. She said, there's Back to Godhead magazines in the back seat. Take 10 of them. So I grabbed 10 magazines. She said, she looked at me, she said, you don't need money on an international flight. And I said, okay, I believe you. And so I went with my 10 magazines and my little tiny box, and there was something inside of me that was like laughing at the world I believed before. It was like, you see, I don't need any of that. I don't need that glamour. I don't need the sophistication. I don't need that lifestyle. I just have what I have now. And so I got to the airport. I distributed my 10 magazines over the course of the flight. And then I got to Hong Kong, and I'm thinking, because, I'm only new, so I'm thinking, wow, this is the husband that Prabhupada said he was going to give me a husband. Oh, wonder what he's like. Wonder what he looks like. Maybe he's like tall, he's got blue eyes, he's got blonde hair. Wow, and I started to go retrograde a little bit. And then it was really funny, because then I said to myself, or maybe there'll be no one there. And I thought that thought just sort of crossed my mind. And then I got off the plane, right? And I'm looking around. Where is he? Where is he? And there was no one there. And so I was like, okay, but I've got my little suitcase. I've got now $10 a magazine. I've got $100. I'm okay. I can take care of myself. And so then I looked around. I found a policeman, and there was a sort of a desk where you could make inquiries. And I told them, I've come here. I'm supposed to marry somebody. I was so naive. And they say, who? And I say, just a minute. Here, it's Warren Weinstein. And they say, where is he staying? I say, he's staying at American Express. They look at me. I look at them. They say, that's not a residence. That's an office. That's an address. So I said, oh, well, I don't know where he's staying, actually. That's all I know. And I haven't met him. So they were like looking at me like, who is this young lady? And I'm very confident, and so then they said, well, you'll have to wait till the morning. We'll ring that number and we'll get in touch. And so I said, okay. So I took my little suitcase, and in India, it's not at all uncommon that people sleep in airports. It happens all over the place, but not in Hong Kong in those days. But I took my little suitcase and I found a few seats, and I lay down and I went to sleep. And I was very peaceful. The morning came and I went back to the policeman and he said he'd informed them that I was here and someone was coming to pick me up. And then within half an hour, somebody came, Bali Madan came, picked me up, took me back to a very cheap but very ill-reputable area where there were cheap apartments, not apartments, guest houses. And out on the stairs in front of this big, ugly building was my husband-to-be, and we met, Hare Krishna, I didn't know what else to say. And I've been told all I need to bring with me is yellow cloth, because now I'm wearing saffron cloth, because the girls wore saffron cloth when they were outside. Now you bring in your yellow cloth. Once you're married, you put on yellow cloth and you have to have your ears pierced. This is what we knew. And so Bali Madan said, go get some flowers. We went to the flower market. We came back with some flowers. He had got 2 witnesses who were just off the street. And we went to an apartment building, and on the 5th floor was the Hindu temple. We came in, he put down a piece of board, he put some bricks around, he put some sand, some colored powder, paint powder, and there we were married, right in front of Brahma, Vishnu, or Shiva, and of course, a devotee. And we tied together very earnestly my sari to his dhoti, which was the first argument we had, because we didn't know that you tie to a chadar so you can take it off and you can move freely. So we tied together from the very beginning. And we went to a satsang. But I don't know anything about India at this time. I don't know anything about any of this. And I'm tied to this person I don't know, I've never met before, and we're husband and wife. And off we went to the satsang, and the pile of shoes out the front of the apartment building. We climbed over all the shoes to get inside, tied together. And I'm like, this is amazing. This is what I've signed up for. And
oh my goodness.
At that point, my relationship with Srila Prabhupada became absolutely imperative, because every single thing in my life had radically changed. And I had the bond with my parents, who were, conservatively following my journey at a distance. And I'm doing this for Srila Prabhupada. Don't know what it is, but I'm doing it for Srila Prabhupada.
My goodness. So it was the same day that you landed, you got married?
Same day I landed, we got married.
Wow.
And we're still married. And that was December 1970. So we've been married for 56 years.
Krishna. Wow. That knot was tight.
That knot was tight, yes. Many times I noticed that the knot was tight. So that was my first important connection with Srila Prabhupada. But I think, as I mentioned, that also then what happened was that we stayed in Hong Kong. We tried our best. We couldn't conceive at that time, impossible to imagine that there would be such a thing as a Chinese devotee. In China itself, politically, there was something called the Cultural Revolution, where the young people in the Red Army were culling anyone that they were suspicious of. And it was brutal. And it was terrifying. And the energy coming from China into Hong Kong was very, very prominent. It was British Hong Kong. So there was a Britishness about the place. There were a lot of Westerners living there at that time. The culture had been very British colonized, but there was this sort of threat that in I'd forgotten what year it was, something in the 1980s, China would take back Hong Kong. And so in the back of my mind, I was always thinking, I cannot be there for that. I cannot stay in this place. This place is a horrible place. I don't like the people. I don't like the slums that we were living in at that time for a little while. The dirtiness of the place. I don't want to be here. But I'm married, and my husband was enthusiastic and wanted to serve Srila Prabhupada. And so I stayed kind of a bit steady for a while. And then at a certain point, I think it was 1972, Srila Prabhupada was supposed to come to Hong Kong. And I was like holding on to this thread that, Srila Prabhupada. And then we got a message from Bali Madan, our GBC at the time, and he said, Srila Prabhupada decided not to come because you don't have a temple yet. And there's nowhere for him to stay. And there was no sensitivity at that point to how crucial that visit was. And at that point, I had a bit of a breakdown. And I said to my husband, that's it, I'm going. I'm going home to my mother, which I often said, I'm going home to my mother. Australia's nearby, I'm going. And my husband became worried, and he took it quite seriously. And he said, you should go, and you should be there when Prabhupada is in Australia. So that was my second encounter with Srila Prabhupada in 1972 in Australia.
Wow. So you met
And then,
Prabhupada in LA,
yeah,
and then you met him in Australia.
yes. And in Australia, I came in from Hong Kong. I had a sense that I was not from Australia. I was kind of like better than that. You sometimes have a bit of sort of self-importance. And I thought, I'm from this important place where I suffer so hard. I must be better than the people who just stay in an ordinary old temple and have lots of good association. There's no women there. It's lonely there. I must be better. So that had to be removed, and Krishna sort of had his expert ways to bring that down. And then when Srila Prabhupada actually came to Australia, my mood was much more tempered. And I remember he came first to Sydney, and he had come from, I don't know where, but he had gone through Singapore, and he wanted to enter Singapore, and the Singaporean government refused him entry. And that's the only country in the world that ever refused him entry. And because they refused him entry, he had to move on very quickly to Australia. And so it threw out all of his timings. And the telegram to say he was arriving, it arrived after he arrived. So that meant the temple was everyone was getting everything ready for his arrival. When a telegram comes and says that he's arriving, but he actually had already arrived. So we ran outside, and we had a car to get ready and everything to get it in place. And a taxi drove up, and Srila Prabhupada got out of the taxi. And everyone was sort of aghast. And they all ran inside trying to clean everything up very quickly because he wasn't expected. And I ran inside, and I grabbed his shoes off the Vyasa-san. I was holding them so that he could sit on the Vyasa-san. I was just sitting there like looking and holding his shoes. And then when he came in, I started crying and crying and crying. And Srila Prabhupada looked around, and they looked at me. And he said to the temple president, who is this girl? He's kind of like hysterically crying, and everybody else is like happy. And then he said, that's Bhurijana's wife. And Prabhupada's eyes again got very big, and he looked around. He said, oh, is he here? And he looked around. And then I said, because I'm involved now, I said, no, Prabhupada, he's not here. I came alone. And then he looked at me, and then he said, oh, you haven't been fighting, have you?
Oh.
And we were fighting so much. There was so much fighting. And I went, no, Prabhupada, no, we're not fighting. And I looked back at him, and he's like, good. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just lied to my spiritual master. Oh. And I was like full of panic. I'm holding onto his shoes and crying, completely confused. And then he looks at me and he says, actually, he said, in India, when husband and wife fight, it is not taken very seriously. And he told the story of Gandhi, who one time told his wife, get out. And she left, but she went to the gate and she sat down there. And then sometime later he came out and he said to his wife, what are you doing? And she said, I have nowhere to go. So then he said, husband and wife fighting is like when there's clouds in the morning and thunder, but there won't be any light, any rain. He said, actually, husband and wife fighting is not a very serious thing. And he went like that. Oh, thank you. So I got a lot of time with him during that short visit because I was not from there. And I'd go over to his place where and I could stay there because Upendra was his cook and I knew Upendra from earlier. So one day, a reporter came to the Sydney temple, and I had two wishes that I still wanted to, I could almost say, offer Srila Prabhupada. And one of them was that I could use my fame and reputation somehow or other to glorify him, which wasn't very big. And the other one was that I could sing for him because I thought I had a nice voice. So the first one, a reporter arrived at the temple one day, a young man doing a report on Prabhupada. And I went over and spoke to him a little bit and told him who I was. And I was there and I was actually standing outside and I was washing a pot. And I had my head kind of covered, sort of like this, you know, and I'm washing the pot. And he was interested. It was a good story. So he took a photo of me and he said, "This is a good story." So the next day, this story comes out. The headline is Ned Kelly's girlfriend, because that was a part I played in a short part in a film. Ned Kelly's girlfriend is Hare Krishna now. And to my horror, there were two pictures underneath the heading. One was a picture of me. On one side was a picture of me washing the pot and looked quite homely and happy and washing the pot. On the other side, there was a picture of me and I was only wearing a towel. From here down, there was a towel. Everything else was uncovered and I had heavy makeup on, sort of going like this and looking kind of trying to look sultry. And they found this picture, I don't know from where, and they put these two pictures there. And when I saw them side by side, these two pictures, I was like horrified. You know, that's what I was doing. That was my life before. And this one, I looked clean, you know. So what did? They brought the newspaper over to the apartment where Srila Prabhupada was staying upstairs. And I said to them, please don't show him this. Please don't show him this. They thought it was funny. So they took it upstairs, and of course they showed it to him. The whole day I was in like shock and embarrassment. And they took it upstairs, they came down, and it took me a bit of time before I could ask what happened. And when I asked them, they said, well, Srila Prabhupada looked at the two pictures, and he pointed to the first one, and he said, in this one, she looks very morose. In the second one, he said, in this one, she looks very beautiful. And then he said, he looked at it and he said, but to the materialist, they would see it the other way. And then he just dismissed it. But I was feeling awful. You know, I just felt like horrible. And then later in the day, when he came downstairs to go to the temple, he sat down to have his shoes put on, and I sat nearby, but I was kind of hiding a bit. And Prabhupada looked over at me, and he said to me, he said, just give this one life to Krishna. He said, you've had so many lives. Just give this one life to Krishna. And I'm like, yeah. And then he said, and after that, you can do whatever you want. And that was so brilliant because I wasn't mature enough to really be able to even imagine giving a life to Krishna. And so when he said, you can do whatever you want after this life, This life is for Krishna. After that, you can do whatever you want. He was so expert. And so I said, yes, I'll do that. And then a few days later, they had a big double-decker bus. They'd take Prabhupada from his place to the temple. And when we got onto the bus, I started singing because there was no one else. I started singing. And so when we got to the temple, we came inside and he sat on the Vyasasana. And he was about to start Jai Radha Madhava. And I never saw him do something like this before. He's about to start Jai Radha Madhava, and he turns around, he looks at me, and I'm sitting on the ground, just beside, and he said, "You lead." And I was like, so I closed my eyes and I started singing Jai Radha Madhava, and I started singing Jai Radha Madhava, and I was like, this is extraordinary. And then at the end, when I finished, he looked at me and he said, "Krishna is so merciful to you." He said, "He has saved you from so much nonsense." It's like, yes, he saved me from so much nonsense.
Wow.
So then I was trying to convince him that I didn't have to go back to Hong Kong. It was too hard. It was too lonely. It was too difficult. And he assured me that when he went to Hong Kong, he would look at the situation because he was going there for one day after Australia, New Zealand. He said, "I will look and see, and then I will let you know." So I was thinking, I was trying to convince my husband also, we have to leave. But my husband was obedient. And so when he went to Hong Kong, I sort of knew it also, when Prabhupada would come somewhere, everyone would show up, right? Everyone would come and they would give him garlands and so many things. There was a big celebration. And so he saw all these young Indian children that we'd been teaching and all these Indian businessmen who never showed up any other time. And all these people showed up. And then he turned to my husband and he said, "Your wife said there are no devotees here, but there are so many devotees here." He said, "Tell her to come back immediately." And I was in New Zealand at this time, and I loved it there. It was very natural, and we had a house there. Prabhupada had installed the deities that were there at the time. He'd installed them, and Radha, Govardhan, and Dari, I think. And I remember just before I got the message from Srila Prabhupada, I was outside in the grassy outside. In Hong Kong, there was no grass. There was no outside. It was all apartment buildings. And I was thinking about Hong Kong, and the thought again came to my mind. If you had a choice between going back to Krishna slowly and pleasantly or quickly and difficultly, which would you choose? And I was like, I don't like this question. But when I thought about it, I couldn't help but say, I would rather go back quickly, even if it's difficult, because it's a bit meaningless to stay here in the world on and on and on and on when you've kind of understood that it's not real. And then the next day the message came, tell her to come back immediately. And I cried and cried and cried. But I went back, and then we stayed on for a little while, and then we became a little bit dissatisfied. And Srila Prabhupada recognized that we were struggling. So he came to the Philippines in 1972, and he asked us to come from Hong Kong and join him in the Philippines. So we went to the Philippines, and my husband was intent on now telling Srila Prabhupada we had to leave Hong Kong. Because it took us 1 month, from the beginning of a month to the end of the month, going door to door with all the Hong Kong officers to collect the rent for the temple. Then the next month started, and we were again collecting the rent. And Srila Prabhupada, when we asked him, could we leave Hong Kong, when we told him that it took us all that time, he said he agreed that we could leave. But at the same time, he said, Hong Kong is the gateway to China. He said, 1/3 of the people in the world are Chinese. We have to keep this temple open because of that. He said, it's just like a university course. If you put a university course and only 1 or 2 people attend, you still have to keep the university course going. So we have to keep Hong Kong open.
What an amazing visionary Srila Prabhupada was.
Yeah. I'll tell you something wonderful too. We were trying to get to see him in the Philippines by hook or by crook. We were trying to get into his room because we were the only ones that were senior there. Everybody else was new. So we got into his room at one point, and he was sitting behind a desk. There was a desk table, and he was very grave. He wasn't speaking, and we were feeling a little uncomfortable that we had maneuvered our way into his company. And he was just sitting there looking. And there was some kind of a souvenir on the table. It was like a boat, maybe with a sail, something. And he picked it up, and it was very fragile. And as he was playing with it, he broke it. And he was just looking at it in a very kind of relaxed, strong way. And he said, he just looked up and he said, it is my desire that all the souls in the universe go back to Godhead. And then he said, you please help me with this. So we said, we didn't say anything. We were just shocked. But we, in our minds, said, yes, if you let us come to Philippines and leave Hong Kong, we'll help you. We don't like Hong Kong. And so when he left, we went back to Hong Kong, packed everything, and came back to the Philippines. But we were there about 4 months, and a message came from the printer who was printing the first ever Chinese Back to Godhead magazine, which my husband had made by giving pages to the secretaries of all the Indian businessmen. Their secretaries were Chinese. So he gave everybody a page and asked them to translate it. And then he said, it's easy. It's really easy. You just give them a page, they translate it, we put it together, and we print it. So we did that. But none of these Chinese people knew what exactly was being referred to. At best, they were Buddhist, and mostly they weren't even that. And so when we got it back, we didn't know, but it didn't make any sense. So I printed it. And so then the printing company was saying to my husband, we're in the Philippines, you have to come and pick up this magazine. So he had to go back to Hong Kong. And when he got back to Hong Kong, he sent a message to Srila Prabhupada saying he just picked up these magazines. And Srila Prabhupada sent a telegram back saying, thank you very much. May Krishna bless you more. And then my husband told me, I'm still in the Philippines, I don't know this. My husband has decided he wants to go back and commit again to Hong Kong. So he sends me a ticket and says, I have to come back to Hong Kong. So we came back. But it was very difficult. He was very enthusiastic. We started preaching to the Chinese. We started liking the Chinese people. I would distribute these Chinese magazines, and really, honestly, no one knew what they were. Didn't make sense. The magazine didn't make sense. And sometimes people would ring up because they went, what is it? And slowly we made ourselves a congregation. But the interesting part was to do that, we became soft on the sadhana. We became soft on the dress, all the outer aspects of our Krishna consciousness that had been there before. We relaxed on them. And we were living in a Chinese area. We were now cooking Chinese food. We were going to Chinese places with the Chinese devotees who were coming little by little. And then 1974, Srila Prabhupada heard that we had become quite relaxed. and he was concerned. And so he came through Hong Kong on his way to India. And at that time, I was told later that he said, I'm going to Hong Kong to save Bhurijana and Jagattarini. So he came. I'd gone back to thinking I want to be an actress again. It was kind of a good way to do something. And so I had lost a lot of my Krishna conscious structure. And my husband less, much, much less. But we had both become acclimatized to a more materialistic circumstance. And so he came, and this time he was very grave, almost to the point that I thought he was stern. When he got off the plane and he came walking out of the departure doors opened, and Srila Prabhupada was standing there, and I had makeup and nice little curly things in my hair and flowers here and there and a chiffon sari, which I wasn't like that prior. And my husband had hair, and Prabhupada looked around like this, and he scanned right over the top of us, like, where are the devotees? And my husband, I remember, he was shocked, and I was too. And he had his head held high. He looked to me like Lord Srinivas. He just looked, where are the devotees? Looked right through us and kept going. And then I was really scared. We got in the car. We had bought a nice car, and Satsvarup Maharaj was his servant. He got in. Prabhupada got in the front. And immediately he started. So what is your morning program? He said, you have moved from the temple, you have started your own place, what is this, what is this? And he continued to ask many, many questions. And by the time we got back to the hotel where he was to stay, I was petrified because he was exposing all the irregularities that had cropped up and become part of our lifestyle. And because I had my own independent lifestyle, I wanted to be an actress. I was getting pictures done and makeup and all sorts of things. So when we got there, we went upstairs and we sat down, and there was a group of devotees, and Prabhupada sat there, and he looked at me, which was, I thought, grossly unfair. And he said, Jagattarini, very slowly, with his head held high, looking a little to the side. And then he said, Jagattarini, very grave, what do you think of our lifestyle? And I didn't know what to say. And I was just sitting there looking back at him. And I was contemplating, what do I say? I'm not living it. And I can't lie. I've done that before, and it's obvious. And so then I said, it's very good, with a kind of question mark. I didn't know what to say. And he looked at me and he said, it's good? You think it is good? And then he became very, very stern. And then he told me, you're a cheater.
Oh.
He said, you're following a cheater, and you've become a cheater, and you're cheating others. And I was absolutely devastated. He said it in front of everyone. And I was just trying to figure out how to get out of the room. And as soon as the little short darshan closed, I ran to the room we were staying in, and I just cried and cried and cried and cried. I said, I'm not going back in there. I'm not going to go back in there. And it was a complex situation. It wasn't a simple situation that we were in. So I knew Srila Prabhupada was like trying to do an operation. It was important, but it was too shocking to me. And so he was there for 2 days. And each time I had to come to each part of the session, but each time part of the session I was like hiding, at the back or something. Until the last day, I remember that was the day we had all the Indian businessmen come to see him. And it was morning, and my husband was fixed. He was very firm. I was very shaky. And so then he said my husband said, I have to do something. You lead Samsara prayers, the Guru Vastikam. And so I'm sitting there right in front of Srila Prabhupada, and I had pulled my sari like this. It's like, I don't want to see him, I can't face him. And I'm singing Guru Vastikam and playing the kartals, and I couldn't look at him, and practically crying. And at one point I looked up and he was looking at me. Oh, that was too much. I couldn't meet his eyes. So I sort of looked down and I kept going, and I finished and tried to sort of leave. And then it was time for him to leave. And so my husband went into his room to talk to him before he left, and I wouldn't go. I couldn't go. It was all too shocking, and my ego and what had gone wrong and how it had gone wrong and why was I like this and what had happened and where did it happen from and so on. All this was going on. So I was sitting outside on a chair at some distance, and in my mind I was thinking, I can't go and see him. It's not that he doesn't want me to, but I can't. It's from my side, I can't. And then I thought, so what are you going to do? And then I was like, well, I can go to university. I'll go home. I'll go to my mother. I'll go to university. I'll do something, anything. And I was just sitting there thinking about, ring my mother, get a ticket, and so on. And then some Bhagavad Gita verses that my husband and I learned when we were first newly married and didn't have anything to talk about in common. We used to learn Bhagavad Gita verses. They phrases started coming through my consciousness. And it was extremely pacifying. And then Prabhupada in his room, he was playing to my husband the recordings that he had made that morning of his transcribing. And he was working on Srila Rupa Goswami's chapter 19 of Chaitanya Chaitamrita, Rupa Goswami's instructions. And so this was playing, and it went like this. It is the mad elephant offense, click, because of the dictaphone. When the mad elephant comes into a garden, click, everything is trampled, everything is destroyed, click. And Prabhupada went on, and he was talking about how you can give up the association of devotees, but you cannot give up the association of your spiritual master. That is the mad elephant offense. And I felt like I was having somebody diagnosing my problem. So I was sitting out there and I was listening to Prabhupada, and my husband came out a few times and told me, come in. And I was like, no, I can't. And then as he started speaking about this offense and how it affects everything, I came outside his room. The door opened out, so I snuck behind the door so I could hear more intently what he was saying, because it felt like he's telling me what's the problem here. And then my husband came out a final time and he just said to me, you have to come in. So I came in. I was very nervous and I paid my obeisances. I didn't want to even raise my head. And when I sat up, Srila Prabhupada was looking at a picture on the wall in front of his desk of Krishna, and he had his hand like this, and he was taking the ring. Slowly, he took it off. And then he took it like this, and he held it like this. And he turned to me, and I'm sitting there like, what? What's he going to say next? And he said, Jagattarini. And I was like, what? I didn't say anything. And he said, this is for you. And I was so, what can I say, not in good shape, that I said to my husband, what do I do with it? Because I'm thinking, every time I go in the bathroom, I take this off. I'll lose it, It's going to be a bother. And so I said to my husband, well, what do I do with it? And he just said to me, put it on your finger and never take it off. Wow. So I sort of reached forward and I got the ring, and I took it and put it on my finger, and I paid my obeisances and cried. And then after I found out from my husband that he had asked how I was doing because I wasn't doing well. And my husband said, I think she's a borderline case. So he wanted to get it over the border. So that was what he did. And we went on to Mayapur. We tried to rectify the things that we had been doing incorrectly. And then we came back to Hong Kong. Then my husband had his difficulty, and he decided, I can't stay here anymore. It's too hard. So he informed Srila Prabhupada. And we went to Australia, went to stay with my parents. And I said, my husband said, are you coming with me? And I said, Prabhupada will be angry with me again. That was terrifying. I can't do that again. And my husband smiled and he said, if you come with me, he won't be angry with you. He'll be angry with me. All right. You can handle it. I couldn't handle it again. And so we went to Australia, and then we came. Prabhupada wanted to see us. He came to Australia exactly at the same time. He called for us. We were sitting outside his room, and my husband said, I have to chant my Gayatri mantra. So he went outside, and Satsvarup Maharaj was there, and he came out and said to me, Prabhupada wants to see, you can come in now. I said, my husband's not here, and I wasn't going to go in by myself. And he said, just a moment. He went back in. He told Srila Prabhupada if I was there and my husband wasn't there. And Srila Prabhupada said, tell her to come in. So he came out. So I went in. He was sitting behind his low table, and I paid my obeisances and I didn't know what was going to happen. And I sort of sat up. But in between here, he told me I could go and live in Vrindavan when we came to India. So there was some consolation, some reconciliation there. But I looked up, and Prabhupada was sitting there, and he was shaking his head. And I looked at him, he looked at me, and he said, why is he doing this? And I said, I don't know, Prabhupada. And he just went and didn't say anymore. He never chastised me. I didn't have any difficulty because I was aligned behind him. Whereas in Hong Kong, I was independent. So I was doing my thing, he was doing his thing. So I needed to be chastised and he needed to be chastised. But now I was back in the mood that, okay, I don't know if this is a good thing, but you're saying we should do it. So I'm here, but it's not my choice to be here. And I learned something very important, that Prabhupada wasn't going to chastise me. And so then we stayed in Australia. Yeah.
You know, your heartfelt sharing. We're at an hour, but I just want to keep listening to
Sorry.
you. No, we need to have a part 2. We need to bring Rukmini Priya in right now.
Yeah.
And we need to request her to schedule us for a part 2.
Okay, I'd love that.
We haven't even been able to touch the
Ask a question.
So I'm so moved, and I'm so touched by your ability to share this so candidly and so openly and vulnerably that it's really touching my heart, and I'm sure it's going to touch the heart of so many people that are hearing you, because it's so easy to see what you are today and not really know the journey. But when we hear the journey and the struggle and the back and forth, it really says that, we can do it too.
Yes.
It really says that just
Yes.
stick it out.
Yes.
And like Prabhupada said, just give this one life to Krishna, and then you can do what you want. I think that's so amazing. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, Jagattarini Prabhu. But we need to schedule for part 2 or maybe part 3.
Definitely.
It was an honor to have you here. And we've had comments flashing, expressing their gratitude as well. Did we have any
Oh,
questions on the way, Rukmini Priya?
No question.
But we had a
mm,
lot of comments, and I
wonderful.
just want to take this moment to thank Rukmini Priya. She is the Bond of Love series, coordinator. She organizes, does a lot of work behind the scenes,
Wonderful.
schedules. We have a full team of interviewers,
Mm.
and they just bring me in sometimes. But we have a full team. We have Vrinda Priti Devi, we have Shama Mohini Devi, we have Prema Rupa Madhavi Devi, we have Varsana Devi, Tisha Maharaj Devi, and then we have Bhakti Lata Devi. They all come in, they interview different Vaishnavi Srila Prabhupada's daughters. And we're trying to keep this as a beautiful, beautiful series. And someone just posted, we can't wait for part two. Me
Thank you.
too. Me
Thank
too.
you.
And so, really, a lot of gratitude to you, Jagattarini Prabhu, for sharing your heart and your life, and for everything that you have done, and for setting such a shining example. Gratitude to Rukmini Priya for making this possible. She's been the in charge for this Bond of Love series, and she's been working behind the scenes for years,
Wonderful.
so steadily. It's so difficult to find devotees that are so steady. Prabhupada said so many times that you can fake so many things, but you can't fake steadiness. So
True.
she's very, very consistent.
Yeah,
And to the
wonderful.
entire team that comes in to interview Vaishnavis. So thank you again. Thank you very much.
Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you, everyone, for joining us today. And yes, please tune in for part two and possibly part three, because I don't think we can touch the end of this ocean of nectar that you have to share.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare